This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
This is the Easthampton Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership. It is Wednesday, May 24th, and it is 6:02 p.m. Okay. Hello, everyone. For the benefit of our guests, we can just go around and introduce ourselves. That's helpful. So I'm Janet Tatro. I'm the chair.
I'm Jessica Allen. I'm with Valley CBC.
Hi, Jess.
Hi.
I'm Deron McQuaid. I'm also a member.
Hi, Brian. I'm Lindsay, the job chair.
I'm Melissa Scott, and I'm watching.
Great.
Shira, Simon? Yeah.
Jackie Russo Pereira, member for a long time.
Ben Breger, member, just joined last month,
Yay.
so 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah. It's good.
Yay!
Welcome. So you're official, so you should go under the actual members, which is great.
I think so.
Yes, I believe you are now official.
Okay.
Woo-hoo.
Great. I sent the February and April meeting notes over the weekend. Yeah, the folks get a chance to look at them. Any have comments, changes, edits? No? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve. And that was for both February and
April.
Yeah.
Please.
So I should not be the second.
So you weren't at April? I think you could still second it.
Yeah, but it's just like,
Yeah.
I'm sure that's what
voting.
happened at the meeting, you know?
You can abstain from voting.
Okay.
Yeah, you're just seconding the motion.
Oh, yeah, I second that motion.
All those in favor of approving the April and February meeting notes? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And are you abstaining from April?
Do we need to?
I don't know. I don't think you
Just
do.
say you watched the video.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna write down
Oh, yeah.
approved in the minutes.
Okay. We're not that official. All right. So I wanted to give a brief update on the school reuse proposal stuff. I don't know if folks watched the city council meeting last week but the property subcommittee did bring it forward to city council with some conditions that they wanted the mayor to basically request during the negotiations with Art Street Community. So that was the preferred respondent. They were at the meeting. I spoke at the meeting, and then a few business owners from Cottage Street spoke at the meeting about parking, which everyone was like, thank you for your comments, and then nothing really happened. But it was really about like lack of parking and worried about parking and wanting more parking.
Can I just give you a little side note of data that I heard recently about parking and housing? That there's more square footage for cars in this country than there is square footage for housing allocated. Yeah. So, just saying.
I think the cars have a place to go.
The cars are more important than people.
In the country?
Yes.
My also anecdotal thought as people were getting up talking about parking is that when you go to downtown Northampton, you don't expect to park across the street from the restaurant where you're going to eat.
Exactly.
You expect to park
Elsewhere.
and walk a block or two to get to where you're going. And I think in Easthampton, we have maybe up until recently been able to park across the street from the restaurant that you want to eat at. But if you park a block away at 50 Payson Avenue, there is literally never any people parked at this parking lot at night. And so I just think people need to get used to the idea that like, you might have to walk a block to get to Mimi's or to the Mount Tom ice cream rather than park right there.
Well, and we found it, because we've had this question for many developments on parking. It comes up often as an issue that people like to throw out there to kind of stop the development. So the data that we've run is that since most of the people are low, moderate income, a lot of them don't even own cars. And so you don't have the same parking demand at an affordable housing development as you would as like a market rate development. So it's generally like less than one space per unit. Not the 2 spaces per unit that is typically required under the zoning. So if during this process, just again, something to think about and to raise, and that somebody could ask the applicant team, on your other developments, how many parking spaces are actually utilized?
And they offered in their interview, I think, even to increase the number of there were already public parking spaces as part of their proposal, and I think they even offered to, like, be willing to increase it. So, so the things that the property subcommittee and the city council approved and moved forward on for the mayor to enter negotiations were to retain the auditorium and gym for public use, which they already had agreed to do. There is some nominal fee for that. To include public parking and a public playground space at Maple, which they had already said they would. Like, none of these things the developer said they wouldn't do. So these are just like the things that rose to the top as important for the city council. Environmentally sensitive landscaping and native planting. I can't think of the word, but considering or trying to get LEED certification and green certification for the building. I knew you have a feeling about that. But it wasn't like required, it was like they should try to do that. Then there was some stuff about timeline of payments. So Arch Street offered to pay, the city, I think like $1 million for the building. So like what's the payment schedule for that? Access to Pepin as feasible, like throughout the development. So, people want access to the gym. Like Easthampton Basketball Association wants access to the gym
Throughout the reconstruction.
if feasible. So, and then increase the number of affordable units if feasible. So, Arch Street included some market rate units in their proposal. It wasn't 100% affordable, and so. If they could to change, increase the number of affordable units. So otherwise it was enthusiastically voted in support. So it was really exciting. And, Jeff reminded everyone at the meeting that like, this does not mean that we're going to see anything happening and that like, there's no affordable units happening next year, but this will take us a while, but that this is, so then they'll have to go to get their permitting. And so we should all be prepared to, again, go support the projects as they actually go to get their permits for these buildings.
Can I just ask two questions?
Yeah.
And this is, I'm sure if I read the proposals, these would be answered. But two questions I have are, one is there some requirement that the affordable units are like spread over different unit types, like ensuring that like 3 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms and 1 bedrooms are all, or like are all.
Would you like to answer this?
Sure. So
Yeah.
DHCD, who's usually the primary
Okay.
funder
Yeah.
for tax credit projects, which I presume, and I think their pro forma showed tax credit money in the deal, they have very
That's a
specific
requirement.
requirements. Although it can get a little squishy when you're doing a reuse building because you're kind of constrained by
Right.
that building,
Okay.
and with mechanicals and all of that stuff,
Okay.
space can get taken up pretty
Okay.
quickly.
Yeah.
But you try to sort of hit those thresholds as much as possible. And DHCD prefers developments that have at least 65% 2 and 3 bedroom
Okay.
units,
Yeah.
unless it's a very specific project hitting a very specific population, like if it's for homeless, then
Yeah.
maybe you're doing studio
Or
apartments or something
studios,
like that.
yeah.
But for family housing, that's the mix that they
Great.
generally push for.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then I think you answered my second question, which is I'm assuming they're reusing the buildings, not tearing this in.
Right.
Okay.
They're not tearing them down. No. There was a Wayfinder's proposal was to tear
Yeah.
down, but
All of them?
Wayfinders only responded from Maple.
Okay.
Not
I
from
wonder if they
Green.
can get like historic tax credits or something, because they're old buildings. But
Yeah, they're doing it with tax credits.
cool.
I don't-
Yeah, I think it's just low income.
Yeah.
I don't think they're doing
No,
historic
historic.
tax
Okay.
credits.
So that's the update there. So I think that's all very good news, and we should all be very proud of ourselves and the city for getting us to this point. So next on the agenda is town lodging update from Jess, and a request for a letter of support, which I did bring with me because I know you sent it to me before. Did you want to talk about what's happening?
Yeah, sure. So I think you all know about, and I thank this committee for alerting us that town lodging was, that Smock, who was the prior tenant, had vacated the building. I think that happened last May.
Kind of quickly.
And I really only found out about it because of attending partnership meetings. So thank you for, talking about it and alerting us to it. So I think you all know that Valley has had a CPA grant for about $58,000. We've had it since 2001 to do due diligence and kind of look at different sites throughout the city to try to find a viable site for affordable housing. And we have kissed a lot of frogs and we have not found any princes. So this one has kind of risen to the top, town lodging. It's owned by the city. It has essentially been affordable housing since 1890. It was initially purchased by the town from a family to be used as a poor farm. So it's 56 acres on Oliver Street. The original house is from 1890, and then there's an associated shed garage, which was built during the WPA era in the 30s. So the property has a historic preservation restriction. It has an affordable housing restriction on it because the city invested money in the year 1999 to 2000 CDBG funds to do some roof repairs and building envelope repairs. So it has an active affordable housing restriction on it through 2030. And the site also has an agricultural preservation restriction. So it's a very kind of complicated project. And so we have been in discussions with the mayor, with the planning department, also DPW, because they're managing the site right now and kind of upkeeping it, and procurement office to kind of just figure out a path forward to save the building and to bring it back as affordable housing. So we've had a number of conversations, and the city decided about 3 weeks ago that they wanted to move forward on an underutilized properties program grant, which is through Mass Development. This is a grant that can be used for basically any buildings that are falling down, to do either pre-development work or to be used for actual construction. We had flagged this for the city as like a possible funding source to put into the financing stack to support some architectural work. And so I've been working with the planning department very closely and writing this grant, and it's due on June 2nd. So what we are asking for is about $357,000 that would be used for kind of two phases. The first phase would be to do an existing conditions building assessment. So we'd be looking at structural, what's the structural status of the building, geotech, the soils around the building. If we wanted to put an addition on, what kind of soils do we have? Hazardous material, we believe there's lead paint up there, so trying to do a lead paint assessment to try to determine how much that will cost to remediate, and then looking at the mechanical systems, the electric, the HVAC, all of that stuff, and fire protection. So that we'll do an assessment with an architect team. We have a scope of work from Kuhn Riddle Architects, who are doing the Old Town Hall. So they're very well versed in historic tax credit work. And have staff who focus on historic preservation projects. So we think that they'd be a good fit for the project. They'd also be doing a regulatory review, so looking at like the building code, looking at the fire code, trying to determine what state this building is in under the code compliance. We know that it's not accessible. We know it doesn't meet accessibility codes. I suspect there's a lot of building code issues up there. I know the porches are basically falling off. So, and then doing some concept design. So what we've kind of just like back of the envelope looked at is trying to do maybe 12 to 15 studio apartments in the historic house. Right now it's kind of like a typical lodging house. It has the common kitchen, it has common bathrooms, and then very small like residential rooms. We would basically be doing a gut rehab, but preserving the historic integrity of those common spaces and combining spaces to create studio apartments so that everybody would have their own kitchen and their own bathroom in their unit. So the architect would be looking at that and seeing how we can configure the building to do that, and then cost estimates of how much it would cost to actually do this work, and a project schedule. We're looking at the shed garage as a possible location for a dumpster location, trash location, and then also a community space and property management offices. and also having the intent of having a residential services coordinator up there at least on a part-time basis. So that's somebody who works with folks who may have mental health challenges, maybe coming out of homelessness, that really need supportive services and need somebody to help coordinate that and find those services for them. So we are integrating that position in all of our projects, because it's one thing to get somebody off the street, but then once they're off the street, they can kind of struggle about how to get services and what they need. So that's important to us at Valley to make sure that we've got that. So that's where we're at, is putting this together, and then kind of on this in a parallel track that's not related to the grant, but we have been doing historic due diligence. We have filed paperwork with Mass Historic. What we're trying to do next is a archaeological intensive survey. We've done like an eyeball. We've hired an archaeologist to do like an eyeball survey. We just want to make sure there's literally no bodies buried up there. And so, because it was an old logging house, so like you just don't know, right? So he's determined that he does not believe that is the case. But there are, building remnants from like an old silo, an old well, an old barn. So we're trying to figure out where those elements are. And then ultimately our vision is to build a second building on site. That building would have to look historic in nature, so it will have to look like a barn, and it will have to be located in a location where a barn previously was. So, so figuring out where these foundations are really kind of, we have to figure out what that development footprint is, and it's super tight up there. So
cool though.
So we'll be working with Kuhn Riddle separately under the CPA grant to do that conceptual work.
Okay.
And then once we send that preliminary conceptual work to Mass Historic, hopefully they'll give us the thumbs up to go ahead and start digging. But they won't even give us permission to even like do any due diligence or even poke any holes in the ground until they see what a potential concept might look like. So it's a little back-asswards, quite frankly.
Yeah,
but
that's weird.
But it is the way it is. So we've got the grant. We're asking for architectural services just for the historic piece under this grant. And then we've got this separate piece that is looking at new building and how that might fit in. So that is the full, that's what we've been doing. So what I'm asking for tonight is a letter of support to support the grant. We've asked for a letter of support from the Historic Commission. CPA will be considering a letter of support tomorrow night at their meeting. Valley is coming in as a partner to this. So the city owns the site, and they're the ones that have to apply for the grant because they have site control. We are in the process of discussing with the mayor's office and procurement about how to transfer this property over to Valley without having to go through an RFP process. It is the understanding that the property would value under, the chunk that we're looking at would value under $35,000 because of the 3 restrictions and because of the condition of the building.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No.
I was just going to ask if people currently live there. You said it's been affordable.
No, so SMOC, who is Southern Middlesex Opportunity Council, had been managing the property for about 20 years.
Okay.
I think they came in right after the CDBG work was done.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I have to say the files that I've seen from the Board of Health and the condition of the building and the health condition is very concerning how they were managing that property.
Yeah.
Was there anyone living there?
Yes.
Oh, there were.
They filed complaints and it was
The residents.
a resident filed a complaint, and there was a whole Board of Health review, investigation, compliance, enforcement order. The conditions were quite.
I feel like we're lucky it didn't burn down.
I feel like it was not a situation set up for success. So like the city owns the building. Previous administrations, I feel like, were not interested in providing any support to upkeep the building. SMOC would always say like, we can't afford to do this. Like, we need more money. And so I feel like it was just like a little bit of like a recipe for disaster because the tenants that were living there were paying.
They couldn't pay more than $11 a day according to the affordable housing restrictions.
So they were paying very little in rent, and most of them paid weekly. And so they were not getting any revenue in from the tenants to upkeep the building, and they really didn't have any other sources of funding. So it was just like
Lots of finger pointing.
it was
No, it's your job. No, it's your job.
right. So
It's hard.
But if I take off my housing partnership hat and put on my community action hat, we were managing the emergency rental assistance program for the city, and we were actively working with people who lived there. And then one of them called and said, "Oh, we're all being evicted on Friday," and I was like, "What?" And I, called Jeff and Jamie, and then it was not exactly that, but it happened very quickly that all of a sudden SMOC was like, "We're done," and that they moved people out. They didn't
relocated.
They relocated them, so nobody that we're aware of became homeless. They were relocated to other SMOC properties or other properties in the region, probably for in the end, probably to more safer conditions.
Sorry, what's SMOC?
Southern Middlesex
Opportunity
Opportunity Council.
They're in Framingham, but they operate a lot of supportive housing in our region, in Easthampton, but then also sort of way outside of their Framingham region.
What?
Middlesex Opportunity Council.
So, Jess, would the city be potentially transferring the entire 56 acre? No. So it's just the parcel that you're looking at.
Yeah, we have to sort of figure out where the line drops because there's it's interesting. The GIS kind of shows that there's a different restriction area from the rest of the parcel for the affordable housing and the historic preservation. But if you read the language of those restrictions, it's the entire parcel. So the historic piece considers the ag fields a contributing factor to the historic quality, which is true because it was the poor farm, right? So if you lose the farm piece, so there's a lot of administrative stuff that's going to need to happen. Like we're going to have to update the historic restriction.
Right.
It's gonna be a lot.
So the city though would retain most of
They
the
would
acres.
retain probably, I think we're looking at about 2.5 acres is what we would need to save the house, the garage, and then for a footprint for a new building.
Okay.
So that's kind of what the GIS shows for an area. So I think that's kind of what our assumptions are. But we want to do some of the design work first to figure out exactly where it makes sense to drop that line because it's going to be a whole legal logistical
Fun.
Yeah.
Fun game.
Yeah, it's going to be this is going to be complicated. I love a good challenge, so I'm not afraid of it, but it's going to be complicated.
So the grants due June 1st?
June 2nd, yeah.
And do they do the turnaround time?
So then we would know by the fall, and then contracts would go into place in December, and we probably would begin work in January.
Okay. That's great. That's a pretty fast time.
Yep.
So do we need a vote to approve that letter of support? Would you like me to make a motion?
I think you needed a motion to authorize me to.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's fine, but
Please
authorize me to sign.
feel free
Okay,
to
so
tweet
I will
whatever
make a
you want.
motion to authorize Jana to write this letter and send it on our behalf.
I second that.
Thanks.
Any other discussion?
I guess one question I have is, it sounds like a fantastic project. It might,
No,
be,
it's right here.
it might be haunted, I don't know, but
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask you the
I don't know about haunted.
But,
I didn't even think about
the
that.
priest coming in.
The sage,
The whole building on fire.
no, I was just gonna say it does sound like a really good opportunity. It seems like it checks a lot of different boxes. I wonder is there any concern about just transportation? Because I don't.
So there's a bus line. So
Oh,
the
perfect.
Nashawanic Express, and I credit Stuart Beckley,
I know that.
city planner from before, for getting it on the line. So it is a on-demand stop
Okay.
on the Nash Express. I think it'd be very easy to call the operations office
Yeah.
at PBTA and be like, "Can you make this more
Right,
regular
well,
stop?"
office
Once
check.
because
Check
the
that.
stop is already there;
Yeah.
it's already part of it. So yeah, I mean, we had that concern too for a long time. We were like, "Oh my God, this site is great in many different ways," but it is outside sort of where we typically look to do a project. We kind of like to be within like a half mile of goods and services. This is a little bit more off the beaten path. So
Right.
I agree. But yes, there is bus and transportation service to that site. Good question.
Great, well, box check.
Oh, when did that building close?
Last May.
Okay.
Is there farmable land there? Would there be opportunities for community gardening and
Probably not on our piece. The city's got 50, would have like 53 acres left, and right now they lease it to Chickalange to Hay
Okay.
for his livestock. So they have an agreement with him. But there could be, you know, I guess if the city's,
Different project.
yeah, different grant, different project, different city project. We would certainly support something like that.
Any other discussion? Did anyone second the motion?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so all in favor?
Alright.
Yay!
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I will get
And we
this
will
to you
need your
tomorrow.
support with neighborhood
Yeah.
relations.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was asking about that as well.
It seems
Or
like
not
this
just
is the
pass
kind of
on it, but
project that
just
this
get ready
coalition
for
could
it.
be excited about.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is exactly where the coalition can help
Yeah.
for sure. So we've been up there kind of poking around. We've had a couple people walk across the street and ask us, what's going on up here?
But it's been.
It was occupied already.
I know. So I think where the challenge may be
Just
when
what
we
neighbors
when we
do.
discuss about putting a second building on there.
Yeah.
If we were just leaving the building alone
Yeah.
and not adding any more units, that would be one thing. But in order to make it financially
But
viable, we have to add
overall-
another building.
Right? Like, how many units did it have in its existence before?
So the affordable housing restriction says 23,
So.
but I think it's only had 15.
Okay. But to the neighbors, like,
Right,
it's still the same in
right.
a way, right? Like
It's
the
gonna look
number
a lot
of
better.
units
Yeah, so look
is the same. It'll look much better. It'll be safer.
Mm-hmm.
All of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But we all know that, you know.
Yep, we
They
do.
probably have
What's
other
our
ideas
phrase?
already percolating.
They
Yes.
do. They want a bed and breakfast.
Oh, is that what they said?
Yes. One neighbor didn't say that they thought it'd make a great bed and breakfast. And I'm like, yeah, if I was
Sure.
a bed and breakfast owner, it'd be,
I've known those
the
people
whole,
running for a bed and breakfast.
Yes, but except it has an
Restrictions.
affordable housing restriction on it. So
which
it can't-
expires in 2030. So, I mean, if the city really wanted to just sit on it for 7 years and let the building deteriorate, continue to deteriorate. I mean, it took a hit even just over the winter.
I'm
but
sure.
the paint in the stairwell 6 months ago was not as bad as it was when we went in the building 2 weeks ago. So,
Yeah.
you know, the longer you let it sit, the harder it is to bring it back.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think it sounds great. I'm glad
Yeah.
that I remember when you left the city, you were like, don't forget about town lodging.
I mean,
And here you are back.
I know. I mean, I feel
Rescuing town
like
lodging.
it's kind of like, I don't know, the universe.
Yes,
You know?
it is like the universe.
Totally.
But
They
it's
just
just-
like to put it together.
Okay, they just.
What's that?
Jess was the planner before Jeff.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Her parting words.
Has the city always owned that building?
Yes, since
Since
1890.
Wow, that's cool.
So, totally random fun fact, not related to Easthampton. I used to live in the Montague Poor Farm, which is now 6 apartments owned privately. So Montague sold their poor farm
Right,
to a landlord,
right.
and I lived there when I was in grad school
Hmm.
at UMass in the program you're in now. Isn't that crazy?
That is
I know
crazy.
she lived in a similar building in Monaco.
And the Greenfield Poor Farm is managed by Just Roots, which is like a, farming for advocacy nonprofit.
Yeah.
Is this a New England thing in Massachusetts? Poor farms? Yeah. I went-
No, it's a national
It
thing.
is?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. The Easthampton one, from what I've read, was the last operating poor farm in the country.
Wow.
Really? So we
So-
could have a really full story.
Absolutely.
Let's get that on the news
Yeah.
about Easthampton instead of some of the other stuff. News about Easthampton.
Seriously.
Carrying on the tradition of taking care of our people.
Yeah, exactly.
It's great. All right. Well, I'm excited about this.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
Yay,
you.
Valley
Thank you.
City.
Thanks, Jess.
Thank you.
Super, Jess.
Thank you.
Crew.
Okay. So you can stay if you'd like. You don't
Sure.
have to.
I always like,
Hearing what's
being
happening.
nosy.
So, and I feel like this is my pattern is that I can throw a bunch of stuff on the agenda and then I'm like, what do we really need to talk about tonight? So I think I did right before this meeting, and we probably all didn't read it, but just recently the city commissioned this is not on the agenda, so this is falling under other items. The city commissioned a study with the New England School Development Council to look at all of our multifamily projects that are currently on the pipeline, which is only 2, and then the ones that are coming up, to determine school enrollment numbers and to determine if our existing school buildings, which are brand new, could accommodate additional school children. And this was kind of grown out of like some like little bit of under the radar concerns that some people mentioned to the planning department about some of our projects. And so I sent you the link because it was presented to the school committee last night, and so I encourage folks to watch it. I have a copy of the report that I didn't know if I could send to all of you. So if Jeff says I can, then I will send it to all of you because it's just it's interesting. But in the school committee meeting, they go through the whole slide deck and just like talk about it and stuff.
I watched it.
Did you watch it?
Yes, I did too. It's interesting.
Oh, good. It was interesting.
Yeah, it was very interesting.
I mean, I think so I was allowed to sit in on the meeting with the mayor and Jeff and Dr. LeClaire on Tuesday morning where they presented the report. They'd already presented it to Dr. LeClaire. She sort of forgot to include the mayor and Jeff the first time. So, so what I was originally concerned about in the report is that it doesn't actually say anything at the end. Like it doesn't say like, and the city of Easthampton, this is fine, and it doesn't say anything about our capacity. So I was like a little concerned about what Dr. LeClaire actually thought of the report. But if you watch the recording, like we actually can accommodate more students because
we built the schools that way.
Well,
so that they could accommodate more.
If you ask Dr. LeClaire, she will tell you we're at capacity right now.
But isn't that more of a staffing issue than a facility?
It's based on the school committee's preference that there only be 20 students per classroom. So it's not actually that their classrooms are only accommodating 20 students. The school committee's like sheer goal is. So, but we have declining school enrollment. So our population has been pretty flat, but if you look over the next 10 years, we're expected to have an 11% decline in school enrollment. And so an additional 100 and something kids potentially would actually sustain the school buildings and the school enrollment. So I think it's really helpful and is a good thing to know as we enter into more discussions about more affordable housing projects. So it's not just about Tasty Top, but at 385 Main Street, which could come up in the fall. The school, Maple Center and Pepin. And so they do some projections in the report of like how many school children. My issue is that it assumes all the children will be new children. Right.
They can just move.
And like we the community support for any development sort of relies on the idea that there will be Easthampton families who move into these projects, not people from outside. So I feel like it's a little, but that's how they do it. So I guess that's fine.
It's like double counting.
Well, I suppose
you can't predict what that mix
Yeah.
is going to look like, right?
So I encourage you, if you haven't watched it, it's probably like 30 minutes maybe total. It's from minute 12. I watched it at 1.5 speed, so you can get through it quick.
Nice.
That's the way to do it. Smart. Yeah.
And there, so the two things that I was happy about is that Dr. LeClaire said basically like, yes, we can absorb all these students and actually it will sustain the school enrollment, and that nobody else had any questions.
Good.
So I feel like that's a win, right? Nobody else was like, wait. Everyone else was like, oh, great, thanks. So, but it could come up later because now it'll be a public thing and people might have concerns about it. But so we
call that the red herring defense.
I know, but so I didn't know if I could share the actual slide deck report with you, but if I can, I will. I just didn't have to ask Jeff.
It's been presented.
Exactly, but then it wasn't like posted on the planning department. I couldn't find it publicly posted. But I assume it will be publicly posted somewhere. But,
And I don't know if it's in the report, but I listened to it too, and there were some interesting statistics that they brought up, like the bedroom distribution of units and how like that changes the significance of like their predictions of new students, and like how 3-bedroom units specifically are like where that starts becoming something.
Yes.
And then also the point that they made about more affordable units being more likely to support student populations, which I was like, happy to hear.
But she said something like that I disagreed with, which was like, oh, that might be a 40B project, and that would produce more students. And I was like, what is she talking about?
What's that about? I didn't get that part either.
I was like, I almost texted
40B
Jeff,
the
like,
B's for babies.
I don't know. It doesn't, because whether it's a 40B or they're all
Yeah, it
tax,
doesn't
they're all
matter.
tax credit properties. So
Right.
it doesn't like,
It would just be interesting to know, I guess, you know, again, looking at the real data, like go to Parsons Village, go to Wayfinders and say how many families or how many students are enrolled
right.
in Easthampton schools
Right.
that live in this development, how many at
Treehouse.
Cottage Street, how many at
Right.
Treehouse. I mean, Cottage Street, I think there's only 2 families in 50 units. So I think it depends on the type of the development, like a mill development may not be attracting families, but someplace like Treehouse would be. You know, it's going to depend on like a lot of factors.
So do they like use like comparable cities and affordable housing to determine these numbers?
They have a whole formula. Tom Peake was on the call on Tuesday morning, so he had a lot of questions, which was great.
Because he does
Does
data
this for a living.
analysis. Yeah.
And there is like a methodology report, which they did not share with us. I don't think Tom asked for it. But they have some way that they, it's like census data and
Real estate data.
And they look at birth rates. And I mean, what's interesting about Easthampton is that our birth rate and our kindergarten enrollment rate are not the same.
Right.
So there's a gap of kindergartners like that don't enroll in Easthampton public schools.
Right.
And we all know that that's because they enroll at Hilltown or Pioneer Valley Chinese Immersion or like, but there's definitely, so people enroll elsewhere also. And we choice in about 180 kids in this current year. So, you know, maybe we wouldn't choice in as many because we would have more kids who live here and that would be okay. You know, anyway. Hi, Jamie.
Hello.
Something else that I wanted to pick everyone's brains about is that the mayor said something about current projects having delays, unexpected delays.
What project?
Just, she was very vague. She was like, the current projects
Current section.
are seeing delays and that like the timelines that were initially projected aren't realistic anymore.
Yeah, there's a shortage of electrical equipment. So we have a project that we are working on that has a temporary CO, certificate of occupancy, and has been waiting for electrical equipment for over a year.
And this is like to run the fire alarm panels, right?
I don't know about the fire alarm, but it's switchgear and transformers. There's a shortage. I think the supply chain is catching up finally, but that has been a major delay for a lot of affordable housing projects that I'm aware of is electrical equipment. So I don't know if that's the same situation there, but if you can't get electric, you can't get people in the building.
Yeah.
So
That's good to know.
yeah.
It was a very big comment and I was like, stop
Do
talking,
you know
stop
more
talking,
about
stop
what?
talking.
Well, Ernest, I know like
I think
for
we
the,
just talk about Ferry Street. I think
Well,
is
that's
she
what I
talking
was,
about.
I know for the tasting, anything that's going through permitting, I mean, we should always assume permitting's gonna take longer than it probably does. But
But not the Jim's package store one, is that one okay?
I mean, I think that was permitted first. When
Yeah,
you
but I'm
were-
talking,
But I mean,
but it could
in
be a
terms of-
it could
right,
be a
that's what
construction
I'm
asking. So it's
delay of certain, I have no idea.
She specifically was like making it seem like unit configurations were changing too, and I think she was talking about Ferry Street
Okay.
because in the report, the consultants had a hard time projecting Ferry Street because there's really like it's kind of like
It's a blank canvas.
wishy-washy plan, like it's not. So like they were like guessing how many 3 bedrooms there would be, and guessing how many 2 bedrooms there would be, and she had said something else about Ferry Street like change. So I think that's what she was talking about, but I don't know. The only 2 that we have under construction is the Jim's Package Store one, and then Stepler Crossing, which is the where the heck is that?
On Loudville?
On Loudville.
And that's all marketing to senior retirees, people who are downsizing. That's who will be living there, not families.
Seniors of needs.
Yes, yeah.
What's it called? Stepler?
Stepler.
Bill Stepler, I think, owned the property.
They're like they're 2 bedrooms, is that true? Are they 3 bedrooms? 2 or 3 bedrooms? Sure. 2? I don't know, I permitted the project in my last job. they're quite expensive also, I think.
So you said that the 2 projects that were in process, is that the 2 you meant?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So in the report, they can like be more specific, like forecasting for those 2 projects because they're in process and they know how many units there are and how many bedroom sizes.
Okay.
Everything else, they sort of like guesstimate how many kids there would be. Like they have like a much less firm estimate. And Jeff was really trying to get them to like nail down a Tasty Top projection, and they like would not because it's not permanent. So, and that one, they like potential yield is like 101 kids, which again,
How many units again?
180, right?
Affordable or
202,
total?
202 maybe
It was
potential.
confusing. Like, I think they
First,
the first phase is 3 units of 18, so 54.
Yeah.
And then I think it was 3 more phases. But then there was a 4th phase that was like mysteriously added at some point. So it's somewhere between 150 and 200 units.
And there's a lot of 3 bedrooms proposed in that project. So that could mean a lot of kids, right? But like,
Was there any effort to say like this is the capacity of the school, like X number of children, and then like reverse engineer from there, or be like this is?
they didn't really do that.
You said, Chris, when we were talking about that, you said they didn't give you a total capacity.
Right.
The report does not give a total capacity. And when we asked Dr. LeClaire, she said, we're at capacity now. And I was like,
but that's based on teaching.
and it's based on the school committee's preference that they want 20 kids per classroom.
Right.
The classrooms could hold 26 kids per classroom.
Mhm.
So capacity seems to be like a little bit
Oh
subjective.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And then there's,
It's a
I
range.
imagine that the teachers' contracts also play into what the capacity
Yeah.
is.
But right.
Interesting.
So it's
I don't
interesting.
want to teach 26 kids.
And like and you know, it's like 10 years, you know, you just can't. Some of these projects we don't know what will happen to. They're going to take 10 years to build. So I'm like, so it's, I mean, I understand the consultant's point, which is that like it's really hard to predict this stuff. But we do have a declining school enrollment projection, so I think it seems like it's going to even itself out. So.
And we have a choice in kids as well.
And we have choice in kids. So, I mean, the thing about the choice in is that we're paying, they're bringing in money because we're paying out money to the kids who choice out. So I think the school committee gets concerned about, like they like to have the kids choice in, but.
But isn't it equal to what we would get for kids in the community who go to the school?
I think it's more. I think we get
More
more
if
per
they-
student choicing in. We pay more to choice out than we pay per people,
Than we
and
get for, okay.
then I think similarly we get more per student. But I could be completely wrong about that.
Okay.
So, but that's what I've heard.
Yeah, that's the same thing.
But like you're getting the money to support the students, so like either way, it's not like you're getting a profit from this money.
If the money doesn't stay with the student generally,
Right.
it like goes to the school system.
And that's why I charge those. I mean, that's a different committee. Different committee entirely.
Conversation for a different time. All right, so does anyone else want anything else they want to? Okay. So joint meeting with the EDIC, I feel like is a little rolled up in our priorities conversation. So Jackie had reached out to Gwen to see if we could have some kind of joint discussion with the EDIC. Jessica's gonna love this part.
They're still building senior housing.
And so Gwen wrote back and was really excited about the idea that we would want to come and meet with them. And I think we need to decide if like we're all gonna go and then it really is a joint publicly.
It's remote, right?
It's remote. It's at 4:00 on June 20th,
Which I'll tell you what that day of the week is in a second.
which is not like.
I think it's a
fine.
Tuesday,
I think it's a Tuesday.
because I'm seeing
Yes.
Lizzo the week before and I'm 15th.
That's right. Me too.
Oh, yeah,
We're going.
I'm going.
Finally.
Is this the concert that got postponed?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's the day after the
It's the day after
Juneteenth. Yes.
Okay, I didn't know what day June.
Juneteenth is a
Juneteenth
Monday.
is the
On a
Monday.
Monday, so okay.
Yes.
How
I didn't know
convenient.
if it was on a Sunday.
So we should decide if all of us are going, or some of, like, if we're gonna have a quorum, then it is a publicly posted meeting for both of us, right? Because that's our meeting. But what I really wanted to talk about and get some feedback on before the meeting is that when Gwen wrote back to Jackie and said, oh, that'd be so great, we've been talking about housing, specifically senior housing, specifically whether or not we should be proposing zoning for senior housing, which I have a very strong feeling about.
It was repealed. You had zoning for senior housing, and then it was taken off the books.
So I think Jamie and Jess should give us a little history lesson about that. But my point is that I would like us to be prepared for this conflict. I would like us to all be in agreement. So it's not just what Jana and Jackie's reaction is about this, but and then be prepared to go to EDIC with how we feel about this idea, because I think
and some history,
which some of us should remember.
They remember the history.
But would you want to?
It's not only EDIC anymore. Is it any of the same
It's still-
longtime people?
I think so.
Tom Brown.
Tom Brown's on,
Which is why
Okay,
they're
then.
still
Still
pushing
pushing
this.
Oh, okay.
Because
So-
this was when Tom was chair of the EDIC back in 2016. He was pushing.
So
senior
just
housing.
as a little side, we'll give you some history in a minute, but also as a little side story is that the EDIC has been great. We've collaborated a lot of things. They've shown up to support stuff that we've needed them to support, and it's been awesome. And then sometimes they like tiptoe into housing. And then we're like, you're the EDIC, we're the housing partnership. Let's work together on this and not reinvent the wheel. So I think we want to just be aligned if we can be. But do you and or Jess want to give us a history lesson about senior housing?
Well, I don't know the dates, but I do know we had multifamily housing for seniors, and it was really effective.
As like a zoning overlay.
It was just as it wasn't an overlay. It was
Okay.
just a zoning. It was allowed in most districts. I don't think it was allowed in the R40 or the R80, but we built the Lathrop communities under it and the East Street.
two of them.
Two on the East Street, and there's probably others that I'm not aware of that were permitted under that. It was very effective, and then my understanding is we were failing to build multifamily housing for non-seniors, and so it was repealed, and at the same time the multifamily housing that we had before we updated it was the one that was put in place as sort of saying, let's prioritize all sorts of affordable housing and multifamily housing. It was by special permit and not used that often. In 2021, we updated the zoning for the affordable housing to make it by site plan approval, which is essentially by right in most of the districts. And we're just starting to see the fruits of that now with all the different affordable housing projects that are starting to get permitted or online, or we're having developers express interest in. So my opinion is that there hasn't been enough time to see how that zoning is actually working, and if a developer wants to come in and propose that their multifamily affordable housing project or just multifamily housing is just for seniors, they could propose. It's not disallowed under our current zoning. We're just not having specific incentives for senior housing. Is there anything that
I would add a thing, which is that originally when that zoning went in for the senior housing, it was intended to include affordable housing. But there was some kind of loophole that I don't remember what it was that made it so developers didn't have to do the affordable piece. So none of those places are affordable housing. That was the problem.
And it was repealed before the master plan was done. I feel like it was like one of the things that was driving
Yes.
the master plan discussions
Well, we had
was the
been talking
loss of
about-
open space
Yep.
for this housing, particularly like the East Street because it's across from farmland and sort of change of the community character of very specific neighborhoods. And I feel like that was kind of part of that
was part
master
of it.
planning discussion, if I'm
Yeah.
remembering.
And there was
Way
a
back.
whole big, there was a point at which we were trying to, this might even predate me doing housing stuff, but where the city was trying to do some inclusionary zoning. So they could do the senior and the affordable, and that got, it didn't ever pass. But this other senior housing zoning was put in place, but nobody ever had to, there were no teeth in it to get you to build affordable housing, basically. So they just didn't include any affordable in any of those developments.
Because the incentive was for seniors, not
Affordable.
Yeah, but it was supposed to be seniors and like both, you know what I mean? But it just didn't happen.
Did the one that's reverted back to, is that for affordable specifically? Multifamily?
Yeah, so we have multifamily zoning and then we have multifamily with at least 15% affordable. And I think it's two separate sections, or it might be one section that has two parts, but it's listed in the table of uses as two separate.
And you get a density bonus, right?
Yes.
Under the affordable.
Yes, if you have 15% affordable, all of your minimum lot sizes become much smaller.
And that's what the Cottage Street, it's not called Jim's Package Store,
Well,
but
that one's,
Yeah.
that one's 40 yard,
oh, that's a 40 yard.
which requires 20% affordable.
Okay.
And
It's
even-
Package Store.
Yeah.
Condos.
and the tasty top would also be 40 yard.
Right.
So in zoning, is there a distinction between senior housing and senior affordable housing? Like
Under our zoning,
affordable housing for seniors, is that a zoning, does that exist?
not in our zoning.
Okay.
But you could build, like, so someone, a developer, if they saw a market for senior housing, could use our existing multifamily zoning and you can, it's still allowable that you can restrict your housing for people over 55 and over.
Oh my God, I'm gonna be a
That's
senior in
senior?
November.
That's what the, yes. And like,
Ooh, I'm moving.
I remember when that became allowable, I don't know if it was the state or federal government, it said that like this was allowable under fair housing that you could restrict. There was a huge boom all across the state.
Yeah.
Building 55 and over because it didn't involve school children, right?
Right.
So cities and towns were like, whoa, there's no kids in here. And so there was a huge boom. And then when the market crashed, you couldn't sell them. And even on East Street, one of those on East Street was dormant for years because there was all of a sudden there was like no market for them. And the thing that Jamie pointed out to me when we were talking about this on Tuesday is that the baby boomer generation that is driving all these conversations now and has so many people in, the generation after them, which is our generation, there's not as many of us. And so if you build all these units that are restricted to people that are 55 and older, and then eventually they die or move out, there's not enough of Gen Xers to replace all those people.
Plus, we want to do other things. Just saying.
You don't want to live in 55 plus communities.
But once you do it, you're trapped. Like you're stuck with these restricted condos or whatever. And then so it seems like a solution, but it's really making it just more restrictive than.
So it's really for market rate because in any affordable housing development, we have a lottery process that's based on income. And a number of those applicants are seniors. And we're not, it's for anybody, so. So when you're talking about senior housing, it's
market
to me,
rate.
it's the underlying comment is it's market rate townhouse for people looking to downsize, similar to something like Stepford Crossing.
And along those lines, this sort of relates to the one meeting that I got invited to with EDIC.
Oh, where they did the weird housing presentation.
Yeah, they did a housing presentation where they laid out the logic that they're going with, that the housing continuum logic, that like it's more effective to build senior housing and have seniors move out of their existing housing to create new housing stock than it is to try to build subsidized housing inventory. And that was where I was like, point of contention. But I don't know, they were receptive to my comments, but it seems like they just sort of went, yeah.
But I think the demographics are facts, right? And I think that's a part of what we need to talk to them about is like, does this really make sense?
And I think we can point to our housing production plan, which was just finished and updated in 2021, that does not talk about the need for senior housing at all.
But why is that? Is it because the data was saying that, or was it depending on who was at the table?
Well, we were at the table.
Well,
So I'm just saying, my point being is sometimes policies get put into place not just based on data, but who is actually at
Yeah.
the table and who is in the room and who is making whatever case. So
But like,
just,
yeah.
you know,
as
just
far
want
as
to make that.
the data and the housing production data, it definitely showed that Easthampton's older and getting older and
Yeah.
projected to get older.
Yeah.
And
Which is
on
the same
average,
which is in that
yeah.
school report.
Right, which is
To be
still
honest.
projected to get older.
and similarly, the Council on Aging did a study looking at just like the needs for the seniors in the community, and pointed out that a lot of folks are living in houses that are too big for them and
Mhm.
they need to downsize. I mean, but it's all the same. It's all part of the same conversation of like,
Mhm.
where do we need to focus our resources, and does having, in my opinion, does having specific zoning just for creating housing for a subset of a population help? Probably not. Do we need to incentivize it? What's the point? I mean, like, if we can just build more housing, we need housing across all levels, and like, if people believe in the market, we should let the market decide, the developers decide what those,
But as we know, the market doesn't work for
Right.
affordable housing. Sorry, I'm just gonna look up the statistic that my friend Tamara, who's a gerontologist, sent me the other day about the percentage of people over 65.
And I think we need more housing. We need
She's a sociologist.
We need affordable housing. We need modestly priced market rate housing, right? Like that is,
Yep.
and so,
Which is hard to do with construction pricing being the way that it is.
right.
I mean, I'm trying to do an affordable home ownership project in Amherst right now. And we decided we couldn't sell market rate houses because we couldn't sell the houses at the price point that the market was demanding because it cost more to construct them than it would to sell them.
Right.
So,
Even in Amherst.
even in Amherst.
Wow.
So we're going to an all affordable model because we can get subsidies to pay for that chunk, but a market rate house is too expensive to build given the price point that you're trying to sell it at in our market out here in Western Mass.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Hi. Hello.
I guess my thoughts are just not knowing any of the history around the previous zoning issues. It seems like I'm sure there are people who would move into new senior housing. I think I'm sure there's a market for it. Like anecdotally, I live on the street with mostly empty nesters, and it's cool. But it's like, yeah, I was fortunate enough to move into a house that someone was able to downsize into their, I think, kids' backyard ADU or something like that. So I feel like, knowing now that I guess there is a lot of senior housing that was built in Easthampton, but I guess it kind of like what Jamie said, like, is there a specific reason to incentivize it if it's already allowed?
It was such a big thing for exactly what Janet was saying. Like the NIMBY population was like, that's going to be, if we build all that housing and it's affordable, it's a drain on our schools, it's a drain on this, it's a drain on our resources, and that's why there was this big push to do the senior housing at that time.
Again, like you were saying with affordable, they cover seniors. I mean, seniors, and it's, I think, intergenerational living. I don't know the benefit necessarily. Like, I think there's so many benefits to having intergenerational living spaces that are accessible for seniors and people with disabilities and everybody.
And I guess my inclination is that this is anecdotal feelings, right? Like of some members of the EDC committee who have friends who can't
Find
a place to live and have to move out of Easthampton, and they would rather stay here than move to Westfield or wherever else.
So they're just trying to move the senior.
Yeah.
So they can get their house.
Right.
I know, I'm really looked at it, they always kind of put these things.
That first time we had that coalition meeting with the people who gave us the light, thank you. There were some seniors in the back that's there, like their senior needs. But it was very much just like those three ladies.
For the school reuse walkthroughs, there was a lot of
that
were specifically looking for senior housing that was accessible.
I think
that's a really good point. Making like, whether or not we can require this under zoning, I don't think we can, but universal design. But I don't,
You're required, for us, we're required to make all units visitable, which means that anybody in a wheelchair can actually get into
Right.
a space. So we look at flat grades. We do some accessible units for every one of our projects. So you have the turning radius and the bathrooms, the door widths and the counters and all of that stuff. But that would be the biggest difference for a senior project, ground floor living. And how do you do that when you're doing multifamily if people have to live on the second floor? Now, I mean, there is a senior housing affordable project in Sunderland which is just complete. And it is multi-floor, and the folks there are very happy to be there. So there is examples of senior affordable developments, but I will say that DHCD does have a provision in their language about a community can't just jump straight into a senior housing project. They have to prove that the family project isn't working first before you can start to explore the senior piece.
Interesting.
so it's just that looking under any sort of subsidized units, affordable units, there's much more that DHCD is involved with.
Yeah.
But if we're just doing multifamily, not with affordable, then zoning can't regulate the inside of the wall, so we can't require the units to be universally accessible, universal design. We can't.
But if it has any grant funding at all, doesn't have to be.
Would have to have at least, it has to meet
Well, it depends on the grant.
the threshold of accessible units though, right? So any multifamily would have to have 10% accessible if they're market rate. Isn't that true? Or that's just if it's subsidized? I thought it was.
That talks about parking lots.
Yeah, for parking spaces, I don't think you have to do that
For private.
Again, the cars are more important.
I don't feel market rate housing, so I don't know.
So Jan, I mean, under the
It's
ADA,
USA.
under
As long as you can get in and out of your car, it doesn't matter if you
the
get
new
house.
buildings have to be accessible. There has to be elevators and things like that in new buildings.
Right.
But the units themselves, like,
Don't
if
have.
you can just have 36-inch wide doorways, which are the minimum, and you can have a bathroom that doesn't have a turning radius for, it doesn't have the grab bars in the tub, or has like a tub and not like
Right,
a
a
zero
roll-in
entry,
shower and all
zero
that stuff.
entry and things like that. So,
Okay.
I mean, there are definitely differences in design between what you're doing for people who are 55 plus or 60 plus, whatever. And again, there's no limitations on.
I guess if you're a developer marketing a community for, an aging population, you would imagine design the units in that way.
Yeah.
But I
And
agree.
one would hope.
Yeah, I would agree that
But
there's
not
nothing
always.
in zoning you can.
And there's nothing under zoning that we can require.
Yeah, exactly.
I can recall when, in a previous job, we used to do a lot of work with developers building 40B projects and that were all into these 55 and overs all over the state. And you'd be surprised at the number of condos and townhouses that were 55 restricted with no bedrooms on the first floor. What?
Yep.
Such bad design. Such bad design. Or they'd have it'd be a 3-bed, it would be over 55, it would be a 2-bedroom and a study.
And the study could be converted to.
And there would be 1 bedroom downstairs and like just not designed for really people who were aging, but the developer wanted this particular floor plan, and then in order to get it permitted, it had to be 55 and over. And so they just were like, great, here.
Well, I will tell you, the town of Hadley, the only multifamily development that's allowed is senior housing. So you can't build multifamily in any other way, shape, or form.
Wow.
But if it's a senior housing project, you can do a multifamily.
Wow.
Hadley.
I know. Well, don't even get us started with a conflage.
I was thinking about seniors and who don't want to stay in their homes and those loans that they have for. It seems like there could be more technical assistance and outreach to seniors, because I've talked to a lot of people that want to do that, but accessing those loans and going through the steps and then also I was talking to someone who's having trouble buying a downsizing here in Easthampton, and she has like a really nice size yard. So I was talking to her about just, you could put an ADU in your yard, you could move in there and rent out your house. And she was like, if there was more technical support for creative solutions and working with what we have, I'd really love to help people with the accessible, navigating the accessible, the grants that help your homes be more accessible. I helped one family do that when they purchased a home in Easthampton. It's not easy, and it's
Right.
and then finding a contractor that's available, and just making those resources that are already available easier to access.
Yeah.
So I know that with regard to the grants, the home modification loan
Yeah.
program that's now being run by Valley.
Yeah.
We just did a presentation at the senior
Oh,
center.
cool. And how, okay, I'd love to talk to
Yeah.
people about that.
It wasn't me, it was Donna
It's
Cabana,
Donna.
so it's
Okay.
outside, you know.
Okay, well,
But she did put a whole she's been doing a whole circuit rider,
okay,
going to communities and giving information on home loan
All right, cool.
modification.
Yeah.
okay.
And the thing with that is you get essentially the 0% loan.
It's a
and
lead,
it's deferred payment until you sell,
right.
and then it has to be paid back in its entirety.
Isn't there a year clause, like 15 years?
Not in the
None of that
not in
one,
the
that's
home
the
loan.
lead.
That was the housing rehab program
Oh,
that's
okay.
funded by the community development
Okay,
block
so it
grant
just
program.
stays till the end, the lead.
But the CDBG housing rehab and the aging, well, housing rehab, it's a 15-year deferred payment loan, so after 15 years, it's all forgiven. And with the aging in place program, it's a $5,000 just flat grant.
Okay,
No, I think there might be a clawback if you sell your home within the first year or two.
okay.
But we only had 10 of those $5,000 grants, and
Oh.
they're all used up. And
Right.
housing rehabs are also looking for this point in time. But the home modification loan program, there's much more money because it's funded as a loan.
Uh-huh.
I think the money comes back.
Okay, so,
Whereas our program's the grants, so we run out of funds.
so it stays as a lead until they sell their home, or?
I believe so, yeah, it's probably a lien on the mortgage and then once they sell, they have to pay it back. But it can be used for like so many things, it's,
Yeah.
you know, it's ramps, it can even be used for like a fence, like if they have, it's a family that has like an autistic kid and they need to like, you can use it to build a fence, like there's a lot of flexibility, it sounds like, from what I hear from Donna. But I would encourage you to reach out to Donna directly.
Okay, well, I'm really.
There has to be-
She's awesome.
Okay.
She's a total rock star, and she will be able to. And there might even be information on Valley's website, quite honestly.
Okay.
Do you remember that part of it is that for the HMLP program, there was a documented disability of some sort? So it could be age-related, or it could be some other
Yeah,
disability,
I
but there
remember
has
they
to
had to
be.
get a doctor's
But-
note.
Whereas the other programs that we were running are just, you just have to be lower moderate income in order to qualify, which might be lower moderate income and you own a home. So you're probably in that bracket of you're not able to do repairs or make the the adjustments to your
Right.
home to live in. It's really expensive.
Thank you.
It seems like that might be good stuff to bring up with EDSC. It's just like, hey, here's other
There's
ways.
other, yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I mean, so what I wanted for us to talk about it so that we kind of all are in agreement that we have other suggestions of how we could move forward on this idea and give a little bit, even though some of them might know the history, maybe they don't all know the history of like how we got to this place with zoning. Yeah.
One other question, is the origin of their interest in this because they wanna place people like not seniors in houses, so they're trying to get the seniors somewhere else? Okay.
That was their
Rather-
mindset,
Oh, okay.
at least from the presentation that I watched.
Okay.
It was they're making the case that was the best use of our energy.
Yeah.
Seniors someplace else.
I just
them out of their
To-
single
Get out of the house so they can
To
put-
allow them to downsize, so then more single family homes
Yeah. to be-
are available, so people can
So
move
all
in.
Ben's neighbors would have to move out to
Right.
make
I love
room
my
for new
neighbors.
families.
So the other thing that I did mention to Gwen in my response, and I was like, oh, well, have you looked at the housing production plan? So I consider the housing partnership actually rather lucky that we have a housing production plan because it gives us a list of things to do, right? That we can look at every year.
Yeah,
And it gives us all this data and so we have like a built-in to-do list. Not all other committees do. And I think that some other committees, because they don't have a to-do list, are sort of like, what should we work on? And I think if we didn't have a to-do list, there would come a time where we were like, I don't know, what should we work on? So I reminded Gwen that the housing production plan existed and that also the EDAC is listed under the primary support category for several items. So if they were looking for things to do, this would be a great place to look. And so she was like, oh, I didn't even know that. So
Well played.
I mean, so I think that's, and there are some things in here that, are already, like, there's explore methods for increasing parking capacity within the mill areas, which I think the city's working on some mill stuff, so EDIC could just scoop that up as their priority. And a couple other items. So I pointed that out to her, but also that, like, there's nothing on this strategies and action plan summary that, again, was, like, developed by the consultant, approved by the city, that talks about the need for senior housing. And so I feel like that's the thing that, my recommendation is that we, like, point out to them, because if we pay for this study that's been approved by the state and the planning department and the city council, do you want to look at it?
I was doing exactly what I was
just doing control.
Can you
F.
just talked about it all, because it would be nice to.
Yeah, I mean,
discussion.
goal number 2, provide more housing options, including affordable and market rate housing for low-income families, seniors, and individuals with disabilities through a variety of mechanisms to increase housing choice. So it's
lumped in with all the other things.
One of the action items, continue to pursue funding to assist seniors to age in place. So it's a little bit different.
Which is
but
the opposite of
The opposite of what their role is.
Yeah.
Is that the only time it's mentioned?
14% of Easthampton's population has a disability, but except for some senior housing and a very small inventory of group home units, the city has very little barrier-free housing. Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, seniors are one of.
So it's mentioned as like an identified need, but not focused on.
Right.
So could that be a good way to.
And not refuted either.
Rather than saying no to the EDIC.
I know, I don't want to say no, I want to be a partner.
Yes,
Yeah.
and yes, we need more senior housing, and we need this other housing, and this other housing, this other housing.
And also
So
here's
focus-
other options besides building senior housing.
Right, so just focusing on building more senior housing or creating senior zone for senior. Let's see if there's ways to encourage all kinds of more housing.
If we're gonna use the Z word, we have to use it wisely.
Right. And
Zoning.
And to be clear, like, since the housing production plans come out, we have done a number of changes to zoning based on the plan that has we have actually seen increases in the number of units we're building. Changing the ADU to being allowed by right, we're seeing ADUs getting built in all over the place. The changing the permitting for multifamily and affordable multifamily, like we're seeing projects that, like, vacant parcels that have been vacant for 20, 30 years. Well, they've been vacant forever. But like the 385 Main Street and the Taste Shop parcel and just and getting the schools and have 60 odd units in the schools. So I think there's a lot of.
There's also smaller units in the schools. So I think that we might want to point that out to them, is that the school buildings actually have more 1 and 2s proposed than they have 3s. And so that would be a great place for people wanting to downsize to move to. They're apartments. I think they're a little bit focused on senior home ownership opportunities.
Want to move to the schools, Mona?
So is there an elevator in those schools?
Not yet.
There will be. There is.
Doesn't one have an elevator?
One of them does, but it's so sketchy.
Is it
so
disgusting?
It's like bizarre. It like
The one in Maple. There's
yeah, is that where it is? And it goes
it's like in the cage.
Yeah.
You can see it in the stairwell.
Yeah, it's like in a cage. It's like so interesting.
Is it like from like the 20s?
Sounds like one of the
From the
tourist
1920s?
elevators in Eastworks. You know.
It comes with a doorman.
Yeah.
Is there
Double
not one in
breasted
Center
door.
Pepin elevator?
I thought there was one.
I think there is. I don't remember.
Yeah, maybe it
There's
only
definitely
serves
not
half
one
of the
in
building, like the addition.
Center.
That's true. There's definitely not one at Center. Center, you can't even like get in the door.
No, not unless you go up lots of stairs.
Yeah.
Lots of very hard marble stairs.
All of these will, because of the amount of structural
They have to be
changes, they're gonna have to be accessible.
Anyway, so do we want to ask who's going to, like I put it on my calendar, I'm working from home that day anyway, so I can do that EDIC meeting on June 20th at 4 p.m. online.
Does everybody want to go?
I cannot go.
Okay.
I have to go to London.
Well,
Aww.
how are
I
you?
won't be able to go to this joint meeting.
It's remote.
You always
Yeah, you can do it from London.
I'll be on the plane at that time.
You'll be at 10 o'clock there.
Who staffs the EDIC?
Jeff usually.
So we should blame Jeff for allowing them to get this far down the road. Just kidding.
They're hard to control.
They're, yes.
They had all that momentum with the vacant storefront ordinance,
Yeah.
which is awesome.
Right.
Development.
So I feel like
Looking
they should
for
be
their
like,
next thing.
yay! Yes.
I mean, so they've done, I think, and previous to that, they did some zoning change to allow first floor residential in the downtown business district, or partially first floor residential. Yeah. Currently our zoning, our zoning used to not allow that, and I think it was like 50% can now be residential if it's in the back half and doesn't front on the street or something like that.
That's huge, by the way.
So that was their other foray into housing.
Well, if we wanted to go, then I would just cancel our June 22nd housing partnership meeting, because obviously we don't need to be twice that week.
Right.
Can you make it, Ben?
It's a Tuesday at 4.
Tuesday at 4
I
remote.
think so. Yep.
All right.
I'll make a point to be there as well.
Okay, great. So I will.
Do we know if this is the only thing on their agenda for that meeting? It might be helpful to like.
Let's see if there's an agenda posted
There
yet.
won't be yet.
There won't be yet. I only post mine like
Thursday at 3 p.m.
10 minutes before it's due on Thursday.
on Thursday. Yeah.
Alarm.
Yeah. Well, and then Jamie's like, "Hey, can I add this to the agenda?" I'm like, "Oh, damn it."
Other items.
I'm like, oh, right, the agenda.
Sorry, Barbara. Here's another one. Use this one instead of the one I just saying. We should ask because I don't want it to be a joint meeting and then there's 7 other things on the agenda.
I think
Well,
that
hold on,
yeah.
I'll email them right now.
Okay.
I think it'd be good to just have it as the only thing on the agenda.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
So they're not trying to also conduct their other business. And like, thanks for all coming. We've spent 5 minutes talking about it, and now we're back
Right.
to.
Okay.
Is there anything? I just don't know about the history of this joint meeting. Is there anything that we're bringing to them as to like,
Wisdom?
Oh.
or the action plan?
Well, I mean, I think we
That one
could.
phrase about aging in place.
Yes.
I'm looking at things on here that like
Yeah,
are things that like
40
we would want to work on.
I'll have that as my Zoom background.
Methods for increasing parking capacity.
So one thing that's on here, work with owners of existing downtown properties to encourage them, this is sort of unrealistic, to encourage them to add upper floor housing, including affordable rental above existing single store retail and commercial
That was
spaces.
directed at Bernie Gall and Union Street Plaza.
And so that's the EDIC, the Affordable and Fair Housing Partnership and the Planning Department.
They all have you.
That's the only thing that we have like a joint,
Mm.
on this list, a joint thing.
Aren't they creating like a database of vacant parcels or something? I read that in the paper.
I
Isn't
think
there one in the
Board
housing
of
production
Health is
plan?
doing that. Like
They're-
whatever the enforcement body as part of the vacant storefront ordinance, I think it's their job to do that.
So it's just vacant storefronts, it's not vacant parcels, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
It's
Because I would say from a developer's perspective, when you're scoping, to have some place to go that's got a database of parcels that are available or landowners that are interested in marketing their sites or something would be super helpful because otherwise I'm just,
Yeah, you've done
Yes.
you've done great. I mean, it would be
Thank
great
you.
if you want to take that data that you've collected and all your research and you hand it over to.
it's public information, so
It's
your
also-
call.
Well,
It's what I've done under the CPA grant, but you know, we vetted 40, 50 sites
God, really?
And they're
and
on-
didn't find much.
Could that be a tab under the planning department, or is that?
It's,
I mean, the thing is, like, what we found, we've done this in the past, and then the data gets stale very quickly.
yeah, I mean,
And so-
I updated every quarterly report and it changes pretty significantly every quarter.
So like, it's kind of, it's sort of one of those tasks of like, if we do it, and now we do it, put it up as, you know, updated as of today, then
Right.
6 months or a year.
Right.
When
I
we
mean,
haven't, we haven't re-updated it. Then
I mean, it would be good for, I'm just totally spitballing here, but like, rather than having a developer have to cold call a bunch of landowners and be like, hey, I like this site, is it available? Which is what we do. If there was some interaction between the city, whether it's the EDIC, housing partnership, to sort of be that kind of go-between so that we're not cold calling and being like, hey, this site is really awesome. Is it for sale? No? Okay. You know,
Yeah.
like, you know, it just saves the developer time if there's some pre-vetting process. I don't know, just throwing it out there.
I put it on the list. They might like it.
Also, something that I'm working on and I haven't really decided if I want to work on that as a member of the partnership or through the coalition, but like a memo on affordable housing and like the economic effects, like making a case, you know, sort of hint at the parking people, like, you know, parking isn't the primary bottleneck for your businesses in town. Like having people who can afford to shop at your things in walking distance would be a driver of growth and would be a driver of business. So I'm, you know, I have an outline, I have a skeleton, and I'm just like trying to fill that out. But that's something that I think could be something this partnership and the EDIC sign and read to city council or whatever.
Well, and I think even just like development in general, like why is development good? Like why do we need affordable housing, we need all kinds of housing, and like why is that good for the city? I mean, I think we're seeing, you know, certainly in the Tasty Top parcel, the backlash of just like growth, right? Like we don't want you to build anything here because it's going to change. And the EDIC has been great coming to support that project, and I think, and the idea of growth, but maybe thinking about joint ways to encourage the more businesses to be, So I think we should find out if that's the only thing on the agenda.
I just emailed.
Okay.
And I copied you.
And I think we could say, you know, yes, we really love the idea of working with the EDIC on housing related stuff. And let's talk a little bit more about our concerns about senior housing zoning. And what else could we do that would, you know, get at your same goal, which is to help.
And what's already in place that's working to help towards that goal, right?
Does that make sense as a strategy?
That sounds great.
Who else
Is
is
there
on?
any way to incentivize under zoning things that we can't regulate under zoning, like the like accessible units or having universal design?
Give a density bonus
I feel like
or
we could
change the
incent-
permitting path. I mean, you already have streamlined the permitting path. Those are always the biggest obstacles is permitting. And then we, for our development pro formas, are trying to maximize as many units as possible. So if there's a density bonus or if there's a streamlined permitting path, then I think you could create an incentive, but otherwise I'm not sure what the incentive would be. You don't want to overregulate because we already have to meet so many standards anyway.
Right.
That to add another layer just adds another layer.
Well, this one, like if it's an incentive of like, if you're doing universal design, then that creates, you get increased density or something like that, that then hits out the EDIC of like creating units that people can age into. Without being in the position of like, we can have market rate senior housing that then built for seniors that then actually isn't accessible for seniors because they decided to build a foundation with 4 steps to get from the first floor to the.
I think you really need to understand what they mean by senior housing.
Yeah.
What are they thinking in their heads? Because you can have an apartment that's a senior can live in. that's an affordable, that's through a lottery process.
Mm-hmm.
And it's already going to be visitable and potentially accessible if they qualify for that. So what are they thinking?
Yeah. So we want them to define what that means.
I think you should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Where, their kind of their thought process.
Yeah.
Where this need.
Where did this come from?
Yeah.
Right. Where's their data that supports this?
So what problem are they trying to solve? Because if they're really trying to solve the problem of people trying to move into Easthampton and they can't,
Yeah.
then what are other ways to look at solving that problem?
Right,
Besides
exactly,
pushing seniors to move somewhere else.
Right. Pushing seniors out of their homes.
No, but I'm just like what is the problem? Because
Right.
it sounds like they're trying to solve the housing for seniors, but if we peel it back, it sounds like that's maybe not the problem they're trying to solve.
Great.
Good times.
Fun stuff. All right. Well, we'll let you. Once Jackie hears back from Gwen, we'll solidify that it's really going to be a joint meeting, and then I'll cancel. Okay.
Yo, my plan is to set an agenda that's all about our shared interests. So we can each list it as a joint meeting in its entirety. How does that strike you?
Perfect.
I love her.
Yeah, she sent me an email that she missed the Housing Coalition meeting, and the first word, she just, poop. I'm sorry, I missed it. Like, great. Right in my inbox.
And so I think like for us, we could talk a little bit about what are our priorities, because we've had a lot going on in terms of these other projects that are happening. I will say the project in 385 Main Street that has not come to visit us, which originally they were going to come see us like in February, then they stopped. It's probably going to be a 40B project. I am still, and I will remind Jeff of this, but like I really, really want them to come to see us well in advance of when they need us to do something.
Yeah.
So that we are not in a position like we were with Tasty Top, where like they came to us sort of after they had already gone to the planning board and then came to us sort of second, and we didn't have a chance to Sierra Vista Commons. We did not have a chance to like fully think about and discuss the project. So I don't want to. I know, but I don't want that to repeat itself at 385 Main Street, because I don't know if it's recording or not. I don't think it is. Is it?
Anyway,
The red light's on.
Oh, okay, we did it right then. We weren't sure.
good job.
So anyway, so I really want that process to be better, because I know we didn't go that well with Sierra Vista Commons. So I'm hoping that is different this time. But I guess I also want to, is there anything else we want to work other than like managing and showing up and keeping track of all of these other projects that are happening?
I have ideas.
Yeah, great.
I mean, after looking at the housing production plan and doing some thinking, I guess I am not seeing compelling reasons to not try to take on or to at least take a serious look at some of the more ambitious zoning changes on our list, especially because and I could be, off base here, but based on the current events in the city, I'm seeing a lot of potential red flags of what this next election looks like and what city council is going to look like in terms of support for affordable housing. And right now we have a very progressive city council, so let's take advantage of that, is my thinking.
Okay.
And let me see, I have a list of it, but it's all very small.
You're so awesomely prepared.
I know.
It's so fantastic.
I mean, something that struck me was the community land trust idea. I know that's not zoning, but I know the Sierra Vista Commons project has precipitated an entire coalition. I don't know if you've seen the Better Easthampton coalition.
Yep.
And it sounds like a lot of their ideas are around conservation and open land and green space. And I think that might be something that could be beneficial for us, but also make that group of people feel seen and give us something to work on together. There's less of an adversarial relationship between us and the Conservation Commission. And then also just Housing Trust Fund, which is also on the list. I actually found an interesting resource. I don't know if you guys know this exists, but the Housing Toolbox. And they have a whole like workbook for how to build a housing trust fund and all this stuff. So I was looking at that. Seemed somewhat interesting. And yeah, I mean, I know that this eliminating single family only districts is like sort of the third rail kind of thing. But I guess I want to think about it so we can identify the actual challenges that are stopping it from happening. Because I don't want us to just be afraid of doing stuff because of something that might not be actually there. So yeah, those were my main ideas, the things that stuck out to me.
I think it's really interesting about the open space folks because I think I think it's I don't like being at odds with the open space folks, so I feel like this this Sierra Vista Commons is like
This project is
like creating a potential division that feels not great. And so, I mean, one idea is to meet with them.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the coalition is. I don't know what the coalition's working on.
I mean, I signed up for their mailing list, so I took the first step, but I have yet to receive an email, so we'll see.
This is that Better Easthampton group we're talking about?
Yeah.
And who were they? I don't know.
Marty Klein
Marty
and
Klein.
Oh, okay.
other folks.
PCT folks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Past comment, conservation trust.
Yeah.
You're all good. I shouldn't be using
Yeah.
acronyms and alphabet soup of
I was
community
apologizing
planning.
for project.
I was just gonna jump on what Kayam said. I also looked through the affordable housing plan, and again, just coming in with not a lot of history or what's going on, but also interested in looking at zoning, just like if there's ways to incentivize multifamily development or make it easier, streamlining it, looking at different zoning districts where it makes sense. I think the ADU thing is already done, so that's cool.
It's checked off on that.
Yeah, that's great.
It wasn't us. It was really.
Win.
That really was it was in process
Yeah.
kind of before the housing correction plan.
Yeah.
Was,
Great.
It's always good to include things in your plan that you can really.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because it hadn't been completed.
I
It
would
was just in
recommend
process.
getting rid of the 18 unit cap for a building.
I made a
It is
recommendation.
not, it does not work.
Yep.
It does not work financially for a developer. If you have to put in multiple elevators,
What would
it's expensive. So to have one building with 1 or 2 elevators in it that serves like 25 units, 30 units is much more cost effective operationally than to have a building with just 18 units.
So tell me more about that.
That's our zoning.
Like
so multifamily?
So under the multifamily zoning, you're
okay.
not allowed to have more than 18
Okay.
units in a multifamily building, and so it really kind of hinders your ability to do a larger scale project. So you wouldn't be able to do something like a lumberyard. You wouldn't be able to do Sargent House that was just built in Sunderland.
so that's why all
so
of Sierra
it's-
Vista Commons buildings have 18 units.
That's right.
Except for the reuse of like mill buildings,
Yeah.
Right, 'cause
that
it's
they get around that because they're existing,
Right.
and you can like
Oh,
subdivide. And so
okay,
like
good to know.
the schools can go above that because
That feels like one that could happen.
I think that's a fairly
I
easy
did-
sell. Maybe it depends on people if they get like about a bigger building.
build,
I
high.
think
But from an operational, like, so for example, an elevator costs the same no matter how many units it's serving. It's the same cost for maintenance, it's the same cost to have inspections. So the more units that you have that you can spread that cost across, the better it is for operations of a building.
That
So,
makes sense.
So I did bring this up at one point in time, and it got shut down very quickly because of community character issues. So if we're talking about 18, removing that 18, it might be sort of by zone, so that within certain zones, like in the downtown business district, where you can go up, I think, to 90 feet and 6 stories or something like that. 18. It makes sense to go well beyond 18.
Why don't you let the developer decide what community character is? Why is it up to the municipality to decide? Why can't a developer come in and say, we have this building, it's 25 units, it's tucked in, it's got this, it's got that, it looks like it's been here forever.
Because you know that the developers are seen as the bad guy.
I know that.
Every
but
time.
I know that.
That's
And there
why.
are some people that set a bad reputation.
Yes, exactly.
Quite frankly,
So-
I would like the term community character out
Stricken from the regulations.
out of zoning.
Yeah.
It
It means nothing in our, especially
It can
because.
mean a lot
I
and
tried-
be very loaded.
it's a terribly
Right,
loaded.
like,
Yeah,
but
very
my point
loaded.
is like, if you drove down my street right now, I live on Garfield Ave.
Yeah.
If you drive down it, there's like everything.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So what's community character mean?
Yeah.
You
White
know,
people.
There's
Yeah, exactly.
single family
White people.
houses, there's multifamily houses.
It's coded,
I know that's what
racist
it-
language.
Yes,
So if that
exactly.
is in our
Well,
zoning
that's how
bylaw,
we get at it.
Wasn't there a code
That-
review?
Yeah, but we didn't do zoning though. We
You
did.
just did general.
Yeah.
Okay.
so if community character
Zoning would be a whole
is listed
other-
in their zoning, then I feel
It's
like
my
it's
husband
under
was
it's
on
under the
committee when
special
you had to do
permit
that
criteria for approval
I
is
think
that it does not.
There was a lot of interesting stuff. in
It
there.
was, yeah.
A lot of old games I didn't know.
I may
Yeah.
double check on that. I think it's
Yeah.
it might even be more coded
Yeah.
than community character. It's like it's in harmony with the neighborhood character.
So is that a thing that can be changed by city council?
Because it's a special it's the
racist?
it's the zoning, it's the special permit
It's a threshold.
criteria for approval.
Okay.
It's like that it fits harmoniously with the neighborhood character or something like that. So
well, that
I missed whoever that was.
And I think too, because there is an effort to remove bias from, we spend all the time on the ordinance
Mhm.
review, so
Yeah, exactly.
just, we didn't get to the zoning yet, so
Yeah.
that's a kind of a clear
Yeah.
bias.
Oh, there's
word.
so much
There's so much
bias. Oh my
Yeah.
God, in any zoning,
Yeah.
it's just loaded.
So that could be a project.
at least
Well,
we
we
have
could review
family
the
definitions.
zoning, that'll be fun.
I mean, I
If we don't have family
I,
definitions, that
me and my
got
partner
to-
just bought a house in
Family
on
definitions.
Jones Drive, and like that whole neighborhood, it's way more dense than any neighborhood that would be built today. And I looked it up, and
Mhm.
all the lots are non-conforming.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's like, what? Like,
Can I,
I have a huge yard. What?
yeah. I always struggle with the whole, you get a density bonus just because you're building affordable, and then of course, my issue with that is it always means that the poor people get stuck with poor people together.
Mhm.
And that's the incentive, and I get it, I just, since we're on this sort of thinking
I
about
think it's a valid
like-
point.
Also, is the 15%, I guess from a developer standpoint, when we say affordable housing with 15, or multifamily with 15% affordable, when you look at that, you're like, if I were to just do 15% affordable and 85% market rate, it wouldn't be worth it. So
Right.
anyone who goes and tries to develop under that is actually looking at 100%.
I mean,
Or-
that's what we do. You know, I can't speak to like Arch Street who has market rate, and so when they're, so what you do at in the early stages of your budget development is you look at your unit configuration, you figure out what those rents are, and you kind of figure out operationally what's it going to look like for 25 years. And when you have projects that have subsidies like Section 8 that can sort of bump your rents amount that you're pulling in, that actually is a benefit for the developer. We're limited to the number that we can request for a project, but we actually kind of like Section 8s because they kind of make us whole on some of those rent numbers, and they're based on the fair market rents for the region.
Yep.
Market out here is different than market in Boston. So a market rent might not be as high as you think it is, and you might not be able to kind of cover your costs operationally. So you're looking at an operations budget, you're looking at like, what's the property maintenance? You're gonna have an office manager, what are the supplies? What's the elevator cost? Like, what are all the things that it's gonna take to manage this building? And can your rents cover it? And then if you have to take out debt to actually build the project, can you cover your debt? So you're looking at rents collected, costs to run the building, and then any debt that you have to pay back. And you have to make, and it's a game. It's like a puzzle. You're like plugging in this. So if I do 2 bedrooms, how's that going to work? If it's a 3-bedroom, how does that work? If it's Section 8 versus market rate. So, you know, it really depends on the developer and what they're projecting that's going to cost to run a building. But you do that like one of the first steps, and that's how you come up with your unit configuration.
Right.
It's based on operations, not based
That
on
makes sense.
what the community is
Right.
asking for. it's
So I guess what I'm getting at is like if the 15% is sort of an arbitrary, as far as I know, it's an arbitrary number. But if like you're looking at it as like we're either going to do everything affordable or we're not going to do it, then
that's for us as
Yeah.
nonprofits.
Right.
A for-profit may have a very different way of approaching it because they've got other capital. We're going for like DHCD, tax credits, that kind of thing.
But I know that from from a market rate developer, they look at that and go, I don't know anything about managing
Right.
a housing lottery,
Exactly.
and so if I have
And there's no
a
consultants to do that.
Right, if I have a 20 unit
Right.
building, 15% is for
Right.
units, and so they're like, I can't figure out how to make 4 units work.
Right.
And they'll just do it all market rate.
They'll just do it all market rate because there's so many hoops that you have to jump through. Income
Yeah.
certification, a lottery, even for just 4 units. Like there's a lot of, and I talked about this a lot when I was in planning, that there's no support system
Right.
for a private developer who wants to do affordable units.
We talked about that a lot in partnership.
Yeah.
I was just going to add something to what Jamie was piggybacking on a little bit what Kai was saying with the Affordable Housing Trust, because I think there's a way to connect those a little bit where you can, like, if I'm not mistaken with the conclusionary zoning, you can do a payment in lieu of.
Yep.
That never pays for.
Yeah, it's not, you can say whatever you want about how much they pay, but I don't know if that system is in place now in Easthampton, but having an affordable housing trust is like a mechanism to receive that money. So if it is too hard for a developer to build for affordable units, then, the housing trust is a way to take that money and then put it towards.
It's also another
project
source
or
in the
something.
development budget.
Right.
So in Amherst, the housing trust, they request a CPA allocation
Right.
every year.
Yeah.
So they get that money, they hold on to it, and then when a developer comes to them and says, hey, we have this gap we can't fill, can you help us out?
Right.
Do you have $150,000? Then you just go to the trust and you don't have to deal with CPA and you don't have to deal with city council. That money's already been appropriated by council, so they can just kind of gift that money.
Exactly.
So it helps a developer having a different source through a trust, for sure.
We've talked about it a lot.
So many times.
So
When I came to a meeting in 2018,
We
the
were
Amherst
talking
Trust person was here giving
Oh,
a
yeah.
presentation.
We talked about it.
Oh, he's the sweetest man.
A lot.
I know it's something that the pandemic got in the way, I think.
Yeah, then there was a
of us.
pandemic.
We had some momentum around it, and then the pandemic got in the way. And I should go back and look at
If it's something we want
What
to
our
start up
notes
again,
were.
then we should start talking about it.
Well, I think if there's interest, we should talk about it again. I mean,
we can also do things like if you two want to start looking at that together and then come back to us with more
Right.
thoughts about it, instead of having us try and do it by
Yeah.
whole
I think-
committee.
Yeah, exactly.
We have
It
a
also
little-
could support the community land trust piece too. So again, the trust could gift money to the community land trust to be used to.
Yeah.
There's also a community land trust in Amherst that you should look at. And I know that they have a property that they've been trying to lease. And there's like a $50,000 gift with that house, and Donna is having a really, really, really hard time finding anybody to be able to take that. Because there's a lot of strings attached to it, because it's a lease agreement. It's not like you own your house. You own, like you're leasing the plot of land.
yeah.
So talk to Amherst, and I would recommend if that's something, just to get some information on how they're functioning and if, how it's working for them and that kind of thing.
You're leasing the land, it's like a trailer park.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, there are some community land trusts, but I feel like it's really tricky. Whereas the
Vermont has a lot too.
Yeah, the affordable housing trust, there are quite a few models. And Mass Housing Partnership website has there's like a guidebook. There's a lot of resources out there, and we've
talked to them.
They've come. We've had conversations. We've gone back and forth. I mean,
it also depends on. So, one of the first times we started the Housing Trust Fund conversation, there was a different mayor in place who really didn't want to deal with it, basically, and so we were told, nope, this isn't going to fly, and here's why. And I think that we've changed the leadership right now in the city would support a housing trust fund. You also have to look at who's on it, who's controlling it, and who, the mayor gets to appoint certain people. there's a specific configuration of who the trust is made up of. So that's just something to think about.
We have to kind of set that up when we set that up.
Yes,
Yeah,
but there are some things that are specific
Yeah.
to Massachusetts that,
And it really, I mean, I think the reason why one administration was not down with it, I mean, so it does make it more efficient, but as a result, like it takes away some control, right? So if right now, if a developer needs money from CPA, they have to go to CPA, and then CPA has to approve it, and has to go to city council, and then it has to go to the finance subcommittee, and has to go back to full council. If we have some trusts are set up, and Amherst is like this, that the trust gets to decide.
right.
And so it's more efficient because you only have to go to the trust, but your city leaders have to be okay with whoever they've appointed to the trust to like be able to say, yep, we're gonna give you $300,000. Well, you don't have to go back to city council. You don't have to go talk. So
I will say in Amherst there was a lot of tension between the housing trust and town manager because there was that communication
Didn't trust the
issues, but at the end of the day,
Trust issues, yeah.
at the end of the day, it is always city or town money,
right. And they have a people appointed.
and you know, it's like I think that however it's set up, like the town manager, or whatever, still had to stamp it or whatever, but it was a little bit like
The trust money comes through the planning department in Amherst.
Mhm.
It's managed by the planning department, so the agreement for the trust money is exactly the same as the agreement as the CPA money.
right.
They're like-
exactly.
And if you have a small community that has town meeting and you would have to wait for that once a year opportunity to go to
right.
town meeting, like then a trust makes a lot more sense because
Right.
like that's ridiculous.
Right.
And that meeting was ridiculous.
So
Or
it's
like-
7:45, so I want to be cognizant of our time. So I think we've had some really interesting things on the list here around zoning and housing trust, and I'd be interested in talking more about whether or not we should meet with the Better Easthampton folks, because it would be nice to be feeling like we're a little bit more aligned than feeling like what we do now, maybe. Because what I've seen on their Facebook post is really that like
This is the list.
they don't oppose the project, they want a better project, and I think that that's
Fair.
So
fair.
my worry about that is I completely see that as in good faith, but then I see the possibility of people using that group as a vehicle to just be NIMBYs,
Yeah.
even if
Yeah, totally.
know,
Yeah.
so they might be coming at it from a good place, top down, but
Yeah.
Right. Oh, for sure.
So do we want to think about this a little bit more about some of the things we've talked about, which is around single family only zoning, looking at the multifamily zoning for the 18 unit cap and potentially looking at the 15% affordable requirement. And then I'm very interested in where the term community character shows up in our zoning.
Yeah. Yeah. I think what I wrote down in the minutes was review zoning for this veiled language,
Okay.
like all of it.
I think if we just focus on the multifamily and the affordable, like I think maybe in special permits, like it's 280 pages of very dense.
That's where you use your fund.
Control.
You can at least get all the community character out of it.
I mean, I don't think it says community character in there very often. I think it's really just under like special permit
Right.
criteria.
Well, that's even
Special bullshit terms.
No, that's under the criteria
that's
for.
even worse.
But it's like it's only in one location, but it's never defined. It's
Right.
Right. No,
It's not-
it never is.
like right
It's not gonna. Never mind.
I'm with
because
you,
it's
Anna.
supposed to be.
I'm totally with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not defending it at all. Please don't. I'm just saying, like, I don't think we don't need to go through the whole ordinance to find the one or two locations where it's.
So there's
Yeah.
certain areas where
And we can
veiled language would especially go.
yeah.
All right.
Always under the special permit criteria for approval.
All right. So if we go to the joint meeting on the 20th with the EDIC, we can talk about what are they working on. Maybe we talk about some of these ideas that we have that we're working on, which really also affect economic stuff. If we're talking about zoning, we talk about why senior housing we have concerns about, and then when we meet again in July, we could maybe hone in on some of these other things.
between then and now, I can
Yeah, you
whoever else is interested in.
Yeah, and I can scare up our old notes on our housing trust meetings and send them to you, so at least we all
Be curious
remember
about
what we
that,
actually
yeah.
talked about, because now I don't remember. And I do think the pandemic happened.
Yeah,
and then
pre-COVID,
it just kind of
I
like,
can't
It was
remember
something that I was
We, like,
working on in
lost.
the pandemic,
It
and
was the
then
thing that triggered it though. Wasn't it?
I don't know, it's like every 3 or 4 years, we're like, what about a housing trust?
I think the mayor was interested in seeing some.
Yes, that's what it was.
And we sort of
Yes.
talked about it and said, yeah, let's do it. And then the pandemic happened and everything
Right.
got back burner.
Right.
And then we,
There was somebody instigating.
So I definitely
I'll
have some
find
notes,
some
and I'm
notes.
happy to meet with you all
Somebody's-
as well.
Yeah, it's good to get fresh eyes on it too.
It is. Maybe Jackie and I are just really jaded. It's totally fine. Okay. Did you have any housing coalition updates? I skipped you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, actually. So last meeting, I think I made a mistake and didn't include the right invite email on the calendar thing. So it was just me and Kate, but we had a great conversation.
Okay.
And we talked specifically the most about the local option transfer fee thing that I mentioned last thing. So I printed out fact sheets.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Because I think
Cool.
an interesting priority of that group can be supporting this as an organization, but also this specific coalition is looking for both town partnerships like us and also cities in general to support. And then I think even if we wanted to take it even further, we could make the case for a home rule petition for this to be something that Easthampton has. But this is just they're trying to make it a state option. So we do have the option, but there is, like, Northampton's working on a home rule petition for this right now. Provincetown and like a bunch of other, Arlington, Brookline, Cambridge, they all have done similar things, so.
Do you know if those communities that are doing homework petitions are being kind of, they're slowing it down because there's also state legislation to approve it, and they don't want to have like home rule petitions and state legislation that's conflicting?
Well, I don't know the facts around that. I know what this coalition is saying, and they're saying that the effort for individual cities to do it too, I think, is helping push the larger statewide effort. But yeah, I think that is something that I thought of when I'm thinking of like, how can Easthampton fit into this? Like, are we confident this is gonna be a thing? Is it worth our energy? Like, do we have other priorities that we wanna take on? But I do think that at the very least, we could support as a group, and also try to encourage city council to vote and support too. And this website actually, if you look up their website, has a lot more really cool information.
Okay.
But I know that the first meeting that I talked about this, Brad Riley was there, and I think he worked with Senator Comerford, and I think was probably involved in some of the initial drafting of this. So he said that Easthampton is sort of in a sweet spot for the statewide legislation, in that our median house price falls within like the window that gives us the ability to really raise a lot of money. So that sounded encouraging to me, and it also connects to like the housing trust fund thing, because this money would go towards that.
Right.
I'm curious from a real estate perspective, with interest rates being as high as they are right now, and homeowners. So this is, it could apply if it's under $1 million house?
That's what I was trying to understand.
It has to be over the county's median sale price.
Oh, okay, just over the median
So
sale.
it's only
Okay.
on like luxury homes.
Well, but if the median sales price, I think is like what, $460 right now or something like that?
Yeah.
So if it's like over that, then there would be a tax. Okay.
It's a tax on the increment
So
above
it's
the median.
like
Yeah, so it's
950
not
house
really
on
gonna be
East
impacting
Street, for
first-time home buyers. Like, I'm thinking of a
The house
first-time
is-
home buyer, who's trying to buy a house, who has to try to get a 7% interest
See that, it's
mortgage.
something more-
Oh, the
like,
transfer
okay.
fees for the seller.
The white one.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
It can
Yeah.
be for
Yeah.
either
Yeah.
thing.
Farm.
It
Yes, it's like the.
it gives us the option to craft our own local legislation that's custom to their town.
Because the state transfer fees are on the seller. It seems to me that, well, I don't know. I guess if you could buy it too, you have
would be an interesting thing to bring up with the EDIC, I think.
Yeah.
To be honest, if you've got
interesting.
realtors on the EDIC, as a conversation, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I know as a recent home buyer, it definitely was frustrating.
house?
Yeah.
Oh,
My partner and I closed in January.
oh, yay! Congratulations! I know you were looking. Sorry.
Thank you. But yeah, I mean, it was a pain
I know.
to have.
You were struggling to find something.
Well, I mean, we looked at houses and we were like, "This is perfect. We can afford what they're asking."
Yeah.
But then we put an offer, and it was
25 grand.
100 grand over. You know, so
Right.
You could have bought the Quonset hut around the corner from me.
I love
I
that
saw
house.
that.
I totally want that house, and if I was single, I would totally
I should.
buy it.
I would Jen.
I got rid of my family. I totally buy it. I love that house.
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, at that price point, I feel like the transfer tax, at least in this market, it's like, people are just, I mean, the people that are spending money on these houses right now are, it's interesting, because they'll say, oh, well, you know, pay 150 over cash, because they want to beat someone, and then when they get into it, they're like, this is $1,000 damage, and like, you just shot 150 over to beat that person.
Right.
It's all psychology, you know. It's like
Yeah.
you know, they'll spend more money to compete, but then they'll get upset about something minor.
Interesting.
The only reason I
Yeah,
got
it's
my house
fascinating.
over the other
Right?
people was because I did not ask for cash back for closing. So it was like a similar
Yeah.
and then the sellers too were like, yeah, we'll go with this
I'm
offer
surprised
because we don't have to
people
pay her for selling
Yeah.
cash back for closing. Okay,
I mean,
I got the house.
Interesting.
I think we should bring it up with the EDIC,
Yeah.
and then maybe we could talk about it in July. Like decide whether or not we want to vote to
Yeah, I think that was
support it.
Maybe send it to them beforehand or something?
Yeah.
Or- yeah.
yeah, I mean, I talked to Gwen about this
Oh,
when
cool.
she came to the April meeting for the housing coalition. So she knows
She's
it's on her radar, but I can email her too.
So I'll take you.
Cool. Great. All right. Is there anything else that I forgot to talk about? I think we're good.
Well, the recruitment discussion is on there, so we just mentioned it, so we're good.
Okay. And Lindsay's here.
Yeah.
Lindsay and Mona are
And
here.
Ramona, yes.
So
Yeah.
look at
We
us.
thought it was quality mother-daughter time.
Yeah.
Aw, I love that.
All right. I think. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Do you want to give your first motion?
Oh.
Yeah. Ooh.
Go for
Motion
it.
to adjourn.
Okay. All right.
Oh,
It is
second.
Oh, yeah.
all those in favor. Aye.
Yep.
Aye. All right. 7:58. Motion meeting is adjourned.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.